Well, hello, George Freestone again, as we're wrapping up our baseball journey. That is the story of my wife, Carol, and my visits to the then current all 30 major league ballparks. In prior episodes, we've taken you to all of those 30 ballparks, as well as four that are obsolete and no longer used. There are yet two episodes I have planned, including this one. And this one is going to focus on some of the museums that we visited concerning Major League Baseball. Behind me, of course, I have the facade of Cooperstown, which is Major League Baseball's Hall of Fame. And I had to think a little bit about what I wanted to wear for this particular episode. And so I chose the two oldest ballparks. Fenway, the Red Sox ballpark, is the oldest. It opened in 1912. The Cubs are in second in that listing. They opened Wrigley Field in 1914. Then it was a big gap until third. And third occurred when Chavez Ravine or Dodger Stadium opened in 1962. And so, as I'm beginning to wrap up this story about the sport that I love and that I enjoy following, I thought I'd wear that garb that celebrated the two oldest ballparks, but not just two oldest ballparks. I also thought it would be nice to honor not only the ballparks, but the players that make going to a baseball game such a delight. And what I did is t-shirt, but my Fenway t-shirt is for Carl, not Mike Yastrzemski. Mike Yastrzemski is a current player, I think, for the San Francisco Giants. But his grandfather, Carl Yastrzemski, is the Yastrzemski that we, some of us at least, will think of first when we hear that name. Carl was quite a player for the Boston Red Sox. Now, my Mets, of course, tangoed with the Boston Red Sox in the 1986 World Series. And just a short story about that. In the sixth game, where I think all the excitement took place, and the first baseman for the Red Sox had a little trouble with a grounder from the Mets. Little known fact, I fell asleep during that game, and so I had to enjoy that game in replay, and subsequently we have a DVD set for that particular World Series, but I didn't make it through the game. So with that, I am going to switch to our slides. And today we're going to actually have two slides for our visits to the museum. And before I move let me go through the title. This follows our prior episode where we wrapped up with the 30th park, which was the Texas Rangers Globe Life Stadium in Arlington, Texas. And so the title here says, and then there's NLBM, the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, and Cooperstown, and the Babe Ruth Museum, and the National Ballpark Museum. And you're going to have to stay tuned for that particular adder, which is on the following slide to this. But I thought I'd go through that list of museums that we went to before moving me because I gave priority to one that you might not have thought maybe would be at the top of the list. And I'll talk about that in just 1 minute. But before I do, I want to say a word or two about this first bullet. I thought about many ways to track and tell the story of our baseball journey. And the ballpark app that MLB provides on the iPhone is great. And we used it, and in the Reflections episode, which is our final episode, we'll get into that a little deeper. I also thought about things like the passport, and this is an example of a passport. And the passport is made to accommodate things like stamps. But I chose, rather than the passport with stamps or the ballpark app, well, I used the ballpark app too, but I thought the prime vehicle that I would use to tell the story is this presentation and these episodes that you've been kindly watching on YouTube. So this presentation is really the record, both the slides and the YouTube episodes. Okay, so I mentioned I gave priority to something that you might not have naturally expected. You would have expected probably Cooperstown at the head of the list, but I chose to describe first the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And why did I choose to do that? Well, in my opinion, and I'll just share it, in my opinion, the Negro ball players were for so long discriminated against that I felt one small step for mankind would be to give them some priority first, as I talked about the various museums that we went to. And we went in Kansas City to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And you see a few images here. This is the entrance to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. This is, I guess, the icon for that museum. This is a view from inside of, I think, a promotional photo that the museum provides. I couldn't take pictures inside the museum. And this is a book that we'll talk about briefly after I get done reminiscing on the story that Carol and I were fortunate to take advantage of when we viewed this Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. We just happened to go on the day after a night game at Kansas City, where we enjoyed the Royals playing the Chicago White Sox. Well, this day, the day after that night game, several White Sox players were actually engaged in a private tour at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And we just happened to tag along. It was a great experience, and we got some added color commentary by just tagging along and listening to the host of those Chicago White Sox players. Now, I did want to call out one particular player. This is a book I have, and I think it's Maybe I'll Pitch Forever, and you'll get a sense for that when you take a look at his stats. And just like all the other episodes, these blue hyperlinks will take you to more information about the subject that is referred to. And Satchel, in his 20s, started pitching for Negro League teams in 1927. He spent a lot of time with the Monarchs, and he also was fortunate to pitch for Major League Baseball, including teams such as the Cleveland Indians. And he wrapped up his career after leaving the Indians by pitching for the St. Louis Browns, which became the Baltimore Orioles. And finally, there was a bit of a gap. He pitched in the majors almost for his last time in 1953, but he came back in 1965 to pitch a couple of innings, I believe, for the Kansas City Athletics, not the Kansas City Royals. That was before the Athletics moved eventually to Oakland and are now migrating to Las Vegas with a stop in Sacramento this year. But the point being, Satchel pitched his last pitch, not in Major League Baseball, but in 1966 for a professional team when he was just shy of 60 years old. So kudos to all of the players in the Negro Leagues that were discriminated against for so long, and now I believe have their stats rolled in with Major League Baseball. Very, very nice. Okay. Second, indeed, we're going to talk about Cooperstown. This is an image of the broader facade of the Major League Hall of Fame and Museum. My background in Zoom is just a portion of that right here, as I think Carol and I got there before they opened and we needed to kill some time. So, of course, I took some pictures, but that is the front of the building in the beautiful town of Cooperstown, New York. There are several photos from Cooperstown here, and unlike the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, you could take pictures inside the Hall of Fame. This is our tour guide giving us a little bit of an orientation to the rotunda, I guess, with several of the Hall of Fame plaques indicated there. I will comment on one. Jackie Robinson is quite the player, and I chose to get an image of that particular plaque for Jackie Robinson, who put up with so much and still was able to succeed and excel in Major League Baseball. From inside Cooperstown Hall of Fame, here's an image of Babe Ruth, and I think that may be about all from inside the museum. They have a ball field there, which is Doubleday Field, and you will see more pictures of that if you go to that particular link. This is an image of beautiful downtown Cooperstown, where we enjoyed great food in that small little town. And I think that may be about all the photos, with the exception of we stayed at a beautiful bed and breakfast, the Inn in Cooperstown, and this is the front of that particular bed and breakfast. So let's talk about some of the other components of the visit by going through some of the bullets I have here. I'm not dealing with these in time sequence. We actually visited the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in 2017. We visited Cooperstown 5 years earlier in 2012. And at that time, Pete Rose was banned from baseball and had not been considered for the Hall of Fame. Well, Since the time that we visited Cooperstown, and just a little bit recently, I think motivated a little bit by President Trump, Major League Baseball has reinstated Pete, made him, I guess, eligible as a player in baseball. Now, that's far different than being elected into the Baseball Hall of Fame. And so, what I chose to do here is here's Pete, a fascinating baseball player who did many things wrong. And one of them was not admitting sooner that he did do many things wrong. But this is in front of the Great American Ballpark, and there is a statue of Pete aggressively stealing a base. And there you go, that's Pete. So will he make it? The heading there seems to indicate it's key to allowing baseball to heal. We'll see. Now, I come from growing up junior high and senior high years in central Pennsylvania. And in Harrisburg, the Susquehanna River is, my guess, at least a mile wide. Well, the headwaters for the Susquehanna is actually located in Cooperstown. And here at Lake Oswego, which I think feeds the Susquehanna, it starts out as just a little trickle. And this is a little bit further away from where the lake is tapped for the beginnings of the Susquehanna River. But it's quite a dramatic shift from just a hop, skip, and a jump to get across to a mile in the Harrisburg area. Now, Cooperstown also has many wonderful museums. There is a circus museum, a farmer's museum, an art museum. There are Native American museums. And oh, by the way, if you're eager, there are also trains. One thing that we did enjoy is at the Farmers and Circus Museum, there was a wonderfully restored carousel. I think it's the Empire Carousel for the Empire State. But anyway, it was worth seeing. We also had a chance to get up close and personal with the Cooperstown and Charlotte Valley Railroad. So that was fun. And we enjoyed a stop at one of the breweries up that way too, Omegon. I've mentioned to you the bed and breakfast, would recommend that place to anybody. And in, again, one of the museums, one of the Fenimore museums, I believe, we saw a picture of Berxheim, which is, Heim is, I think, German for home. It started out as a poorhouse, an almshouse, and now it's where some of the older folks within Berks County, I should be paying attention to this, where they can spend some of their final years. And oh, by the way, in addition to enjoying a little statue of Jerry Garcia in the Cooperstown downtown area and little shops here, we also picked up my Brooklyn Dodgers jersey that I wore at many of the varied games that we attended, Carol and myself. Okay. I'll say a little bit less about the next place. In Baltimore, we stopped at the Babe Ruth Museum. And here is the link to the pictures that you can go to for that. This is the outside of the museum. This is the a little in the pavement. There is a tribute to Babe Ruth. This is an icon for the Babe Ruth birthplace and museum, and that's why the Babe Ruth Museum is located in Baltimore. It's where the Babe was born. I have an image here from inside the museum. This is Babe, of course, before he came to the Yankees as a Red Sox player, and he did not finish his career as a Yankee. I believe he was back in Boston with the Braves to wrap up his career. But if you have some chance, I would encourage your stopping in to see the Babe Ruth Museum there. Now, one that we really didn't know anything about until I planned the trip for 2019, we wrapped up that road trip, if you'll recall, in Denver. That was 2019. And what we found is there is nestled away in Denver a National Ballpark Museum. And what I have collected here is an image of 14 classic ballparks. And this image is that one. But in addition, if you click on this particular link, it will give you the icon for each of the 14 ballparks, and it will include a version of this particular image as well. I have more than 500 photos at this second link for the National Ballpark Museum. One of the things that the kind female curator of the ballpark had was a quiz, and I'm pretty sure I have the quiz in that particular link as well. I think I've talked about just about everything on this slide, with the exception of this. Now, this, you find me with a New York Yankees jersey on. Well, that's not because I'm a Yankee fan. That's because I'm a Casey Stengel fan. And that is actually a Yankee jersey with Casey Stengel on the reverse. I have a friendly wager every year with two Air Products colleagues from the past, Brian, who is a Washington Nationals fan, and Pat, who is a very avid Yankees fan. And I will point out before we go to the final slide in this particular episode that this year we handicap for the expected finish of each of those three teams. And this was the first year that probably in a decade that I actually, as a Mets fan, had to give games to the Yankees. Can you believe that? Okay. I am going to go to the fifth museum that rounds out the story. And on our way home from the final two ballparks that we took in Texas, we came home through Louisville. And I mentioned many of the other things that we did in Louisville in the prior episode, so I won't do that again. But one of the places that we did stop that relates specifically to Major League Baseball, and so it's the fifth museum, is the Louisville Slugger Museum and Manufacturing Facility. They actually make bats here. Now, just like all the rest, if you want more photos than you can handle about Louisville and about this particular museum, just click on this link from the slides. And when we arrived, which was, I don't know, about April 12th, I think, of 2024, it was before my birthday. And so that helps a little bit with date sequencing here. But we just missed the 140th anniversary of this particular facility that was celebrated on March 28th. I'll skip here first. The largest bat in the world is this gem that is outside the museum. And again, just like Cooperstown. Carol and I got here a little bit early, and so we could take some photos outside as well as inside. One stat that was incredible to me is that only 18% of Major League Baseball players in 2025 use Louisville Slugger bats. I would have thought it would have been 2/3, 75%, something like that. But no, it's only 18%, and they're not even the leader. The leader is Marucci, who I hadn't heard of prior to going to this particular museum, with 28%. They have a lot to see, and inside I have just a couple of images here. This is one of my heroes. I have a Roberto Clemente jersey from Pittsburgh, and he was an avid Louisville Slugger man. I have a picture of both some of the automation that goes into bat manufacture, and there's also some still manual craft that goes on with regard to these bats. And there are pictures of both. And this is a woman enjoying the automated view of some of the bat manufacturing as well. This was just an image of several of the notable players that were using Louisville Slugger bats and their particular bats. And the only reason I included this particular one, because there were several windows just like this was just one of many, is Darryl Strawberry is right here, again, catering to the Mets fans that are out there, and in particular to me. There were several notable Mets managers that had used Louisville Slugger. Only two, but I have three blocks. This is from an earlier Mr. Berra, where he still signed his name Larry Berra. I think it's 1947. But a little bit later, Yogi also made the big board, and so I included him with Yogi as well as with Larry here, and then my hero, Casey Stengel. Okay, I skipped over this one. One of the things that we did, which was very nice, and there's actually three bats here, two small ones that were given to us gratis just for having gone to the museum and experienced the tour. But the second is a commemorative bat that Carol and I had made up while we were there and then brought home with us to Wyomissing. And what the note on the bat says, and it's right up here, and I know you won't be able to read it, it really is just marking the completion of our all 30 ballparks goal. Quite a sense of, I don't know, completion or just enjoyment from the journey here that we took. And what it says is all 30 ballparks finished April 2024, Carol and George. So with that, I'm going to conclude our next to last episode, which talks about the museums that we visited, and set you up for our final one, which will be a series of reflections that Carol and I will offer with regard to how we felt about and how much we enjoyed our baseball journey. Thanks for your attention to this episode. See you for the final one.